let's get into the good stuff. And topic number one, as my good friend Joe Biden likes to say because he loves counting, um, is about the nude photo leak that happened over the weekend.
Dicks.
Yeah, it's about dicks. As Jack
That's
would say,
more
dicks.
gentle.
We're talking about dicks.
Yes.
So what happened was, and this was news to me, I totally missed the boat on it entirely, and which is crazy to me because I basically live on the internet, but I guess because I'm not like a huge Instagram person, I just like didn't really get it. But apparently Chris Evans was sharing some stuff from his phone and like was showing his camera roll and accidentally like scrolled too far and there happened to be a pic of his junk in there. Um, that he ended up, having to swiftly delete from social media. And of course, the internet did what it did at first, and it was like, holy shit, Chris Evans' dick is on the internet. We all need to see it, right? And so it went into every corner of internet spaces could be imagined, right? Hashtag Chris Evans, this whole nine. Um, Apparently, he was like playing Heads Up or something. He was showing like a video from playing Heads Up, and what ended up happening, oddly enough, was that fans of Chris Evans, knowing that he's like huge advocate for social justice and all this other stuff, like a really a stand-up human being for sure, were like, we must protect him at all costs. And so they took to the internet, took a page out of the K-pop stands
The
playbook.
K-pop playbook.
Yeah, and they were like, we can
Yeah.
fix this. We can take the hashtag and just dump images of his dog and of him with dogs and of him doing nice things and of us requesting that people don't be
And
mean to him and
flood the
repost
internet.
it, and just destroyed the algorithm behind that hashtag so that all you could find were all of these like pretty wholesome posts about him,
Yeah.
which is cool. Like, well done for understanding how the tools operate and being like, we can solve this problem because we have decided to solve this problem.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, there's a problem with that. And Kat Dennings, another wonderful human being, was the one to point this out. She was like, it was super nice for everybody to be really respectful of Chris Evans and his privacy and his feelings. That's super cool. But can y'all do the same for women, please and thank you? Right? And she was alluding to the fact that this has happened to not only one of Chris Evans' co-stars in the past, right, Scarlett Johansson, but it's happened to Jennifer Lawrence, Vanessa Hudgens. Like a whole swath
Yeah.
of celebrity women have had their accounts hacked and things taken from them, and some of them had to say like, listen, I'm just going to post the image myself because I don't want y'all to reprimand me for doing it, right?
Right.
And
Right.
it led me to a very, I think, simple but multifaceted question. I think we can start with, Reese, is what is the difference between
Sure.
accidentally uploading a nude photo, having your account hacked and the photo leaked, and posting it on purpose? What is the difference?
Yeah. It, Muffin. Uh, it's. I mean, they feel like patently different things, right? Like one you could have agentically avoided by not scrolling too far or whatever it is, and the other, right, is in some jurisdictions like a crime, and so they feel materially different. But I think that like the question falls away when you consider like virality and how quickly those images just explode, right? I think the like that, to me that's almost secondary to like how the internet then responds and how we move to respond to the images. Um, do I blame Chris Evans? Like, no. Like I don't place this at his feet and say, well, he should have done better in the way that we did with Jen Law, right? With Jennifer Lawrence, that was the rhetoric. It's like, well, you're a celeb, you should expect to have your nudes hacked. Like, how dare you take pictures of your, bits and pieces and like store them on your phone? You should expect people to be digging through there and posting them publicly. And so I don't know that for me there's like a material difference, because I think for me in my reading of this case, the nexus of issues has to do with like what happens when the image then enters the public and starts to circulate, and that for me is the piece that I find compelling.
Right.
What's your take? What
Well,
like
so
do you,
the reason I asked the question, right, is because I think for me and where like my focus has been academically for so long, like there's a really interesting relationship to how the image enters the space, right? Like I think you're totally right to say there's something that happens once it enters the space that needs interrogating, and you're right to say that someone like Jennifer Lawrence was held accountable for being a human being and taking a photo of herself, right, and having it stored, right? You could go so deep down the layers of how that worked. Like, one, women should not be taking naked photos of themselves and saving them on their phone. That's crazy talk. Like, you know, if you don't want it leaked, don't take it, which is already problematic. Number two, I'm sure somebody out there was like, why does she have them saved? She's not taking fresh nudes every time she sends one. Like, no, nobody's got time for that shit. Like, what's wrong with you? You gotta have at least 1 or 2 stock photos in there, and you make it work. Right? But I'm
It's
sure
like your MySpace top 8.
I'm sure there were a bunch of dudes who were like, oh, she just got them in there. Like, they're not all different every time. No, you're not special. Like, fuck out of here. Right? But I wanted to back it up from that because, especially, you know, with the advent of online porn, right? And the myriad of ways that it exists and operates, right? There's a level of entitlement that people expect to have over women's bodies because of the way the internet porn has existed for so long. They're just like, that should be free. Tube sites make boobs free, so if they exist, I should have access to them, right? And I shouldn't have to pay for them either. So like, if they exist, make available is I think what the logic is. And so having it put out there for people's enjoyment to them feels like proper recourse, and they're just like, if you fucked up, that's on you. If you accidentally upload it, right, in the case of Chris Evans, then I think the sexual double standard comes into play because he's a dude, he's a celebrity, and so there's an entirely different discourse around the naked body of a male versus female person, especially in a context like the American society. The flip side of it that pisses me off is what happens when you upload it on purpose, and then in parentheses on my notes I put for profit, because that's where shit gets complicated, because we're in an entirely different ballgame and arena now where that is a business model that works well, and people have their gripes about it, but people are willing to pay for them, like a lot of money. So there is an acceptable practice of uploading your photos of your own accord and putting a price tag on them and knowing that people will pay for it. So where do we get off with this differential approach to saying, like, it was a guy, he didn't mean to, so we'll fix it, versus it was a woman, she shouldn't have had it on there in the first place, we're going to chastise her for it. Because last time I checked, the general consensus seems to still be that nobody wants an unsolicited dick pic ever, right? So, like, why should a celebrity's dick be any different? Nobody asked to see that shit.
I'm trying to put pieces together. Sorry for the
No,
pause.
you got it. I said a lot, but I'm just like, I think it chaps my ass a little bit because it is like the center of my research focus. Both topics tonight are, and I'm just like, the fuck, like it's so ass backwards, but it's like quintessential internet. It makes no sense and yet makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and the like double standard, I think, is also there are like edges to this that I. So let me backtrack. I had no idea that this had fucking happened.
Yeah.
Until I don't even know when the dick was made public.
And I think, like, super quick interjection, like, isn't that already telling of the fact that we just missed it completely? Like, we had no idea that it happened. I couldn't get away from the news of the nude leaks back in the day when they happened.
Well, right. I was surprised that there wasn't like an Apple News push notification like Chris Evans' cock is out there for your titillation.
I fucking found out from Ryan Johnson, of all people.
Dude, I found out from my quarantine. Like, we were, and it was, this weekend got fucking weird because RBG dies. I pour, a little sip of Basil Hayden for the goat. And then, we go inside to like kind of try and like soothe the wounds, and then somebody's like, "Oh yeah, did you hear about Chris Evans's dick?" And I'm like, "Wait a minute, like I need a little bit of context."
Just shifted gears real quick.
You don't just ask me about Chris Evans's dick after a bottle of Basil Hayden and a little bit of red. Like I'm trying to, okay, let's backtrack. And so I think there's totally a double standard here. I think there's like Chris Evans has his bits and pieces put out there and gets like preferential treatment. Um, and yet I think another piece, we talk about like double-edged swords like this, as if the edges are separate, but remember they like curve.
Mm-hmm.
The other piece is like, I think there's an element here of like, for me too, that like men are also like inviolable in the realm of like sex crimes. And so like folks tell me, they're like, "Oh yeah, did you hear about Chris Evans' dick?" And my like immediate question was like, "Does he have a nice cock? Like, did y'all like it? What was the deal?" Whereas that wouldn't have never been my immediate response to a woman's celebrity. Like it in my brain, for any number of reasons, I didn't equate this because it was Chris Evans to like a violation. And so I think there's a piece here about preferential treatment, and there's also a parallel piece that feels about like men not being like this, not being as offensive because he's a man. That there's like, and I think about, as I was preparing, I was thinking about Chris Brown talking about, do you remember this, like 1,000 years ago, talking about like losing his virginity at 12
Mm-hmm.
or something like that to like somebody significantly older than him.
Mm-hmm.
And there were some people who were like, "Oh, you're the fucking man," and there were some people who were like, "You were raped, bro."
Yep.
And there's this like dissonance because it's like, well, you're a guy, like you're supposed to enjoy that. And I'm wondering if there's a piece here of like, well, he's a guy, like of course he has a cacophony of dick pics like ready to go, and it's not a big deal that like we're all digging around for them. And so I feel like I'm being totally fucking incoherent, but I'm unsettled, I guess is my final point. I feel like there's so many crossroads here that I feel like I have nothing of value. I'm unsettled still.
I think Unsettled is a perfectly fine position to take because it is just weird, right? And it's why I made the comment about the fact that you say that there's like aside from the preferential treatment, that there's just like a different approach to our sentiment towards like male nudity and what becomes of it and how we treat like male sexuality in a publicized way. But maybe it's just the Twitter circles I traffic, but like, I'm constantly seeing hilarious screen caps from women who are roasting dudes who send them unsolicited dick pics, right? Like they have had to make a joke out of it because like otherwise they will not be able to cope with the stress of having
you got to laugh to keep
bombarded
from
by it, right? And I see that, and I think then we still definitely have a space pretty commonly where we look at it as a bad thing. So like, you like to say that these two things can coexist, right? That they can exist at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
But they seem so at odds with each other to me that we can ever feel like, oh, we never ever want someone's penis to be sent to us unannounced, right? Unrequested.
Mm-hmm.
However, in a situation where somebody messes up, we're like, we'll take it as a gift. Thank you for your penance or whatever. Like it.
Yeah. And not just take it as a gift, but then like rush immediately to protect.
Right.
Chris Evans.
We're like, thank you. We will now absolve you of that sin. We've gotten over it. We just don't feel the same way about women and the way that they are allowed to exist, I think, online, right?
No.
So a lot of it reminded me as well of like just the expectation that like women's bodies are like a space to be violated, especially through mediated platforms. There was another incident at one of the institutions that I'm associated with involving a phone propped up in a bathroom. This is the second time in 2 years. that led to swift legal action, thankfully.
Okay.
And the last time, I talked to some students who had been, involved at least like to some extent, and
Mhm.
that's the kind of shit that will eventually end up on a tube site, right?
Yeah.
And
Right.
that can have such lasting damage on that individual's identity, their emotional,
Yep.
mental health, their ability to succeed in life, right? Just because other people may have access to it and use it against them, and oftentimes there's no recourse to be taken, right? No one's going to come to their aid to flush a
To
hashtag.
scrub the internet. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
right. Like there's this woman I follow on Twitter. I think her name is Rose Kalemba, and she's been fighting with
Say the name one more time.
Rose Kalemba, I believe is her name, how it's pronounced. Um, and she's been fighting with Pornhub for years now because there is a video of her being raped on that platform, and she is like, "How can you not take this down? Like, quite seriously, you
Yeah.
let somebody freely upload this video of sexual assault. You have been informed that that was in fact an assault, not consensual sexual activity, and you've left it there, and are assuming no responsibility for it, right? It's just like it exists on the internet, and now I've washed my hands of it. And it seems to be like the norm for women. I feel like if you dig deep enough, right, like you'll always be able to find their stuff. But I bet you that, and maybe it's a sign of the times, right? Maybe like the original hack that happened way back in the day, right? This like Snapchat Armageddon, whatever the fuck they called it back in the day, the snapping. I forget the fuck it was called, right? But like maybe it was just that at the times like we hadn't gotten to a point where we understood the mediums the way that we do now. And I think that's why a lot of people are like, maybe the internet is evolving and we figured out how to be better about manipulating these platforms to our benefit. But I feel like that's giving people too much credit. And I still feel like there is a seedy underbelly that just says, we will do this for those who we find to be worthy. And those people, 9 times out of 10, are not women.
Dude, I totally agree. I totally agree. And I think that like, it's like titillation by proxy, right? Like, well, I didn't rape her, so like I'm not guilty, but I'm a member of this subreddit that's totally committed to revenge porn, and I'm gonna crank one out to her being raped. But so I'm not complicit, right? Well, it's out there. Somebody posted it, and somebody's going to post it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then the technology itself, like, so totally lends itself to reproducibility, right? It's not like a VHS or a cassette where like every time you reproduce it, the quality atrophies, right? So that like there's a conceivable like end date to that reproduction. This is digital technology, right? Like, and even if you get Pornhub to take it down, right? There can be another user who has it and then just uploads it, and it's like a category all its own, right? Revenge porn and like all of like the upskirt type of shit that's like um, presented as like candid, And I
Mm-hmm.
think in a moment where we've realized that like I don't know, watching normal people fuck is way more interesting than like watching actors and maybe not way more. I don't know. I think that for many of us, like the conventional sort of like casted pornography has lost some of its luster, even if we still value like the Riley Reeds and the Lana Rhodeses, and they're sort of still they're in fact I think they enjoy more celebrity than they ever have. User created porn is like booming,
Mm-hmm.
um, and in that moment, people fucking love revenge porn. They love this shit, and I think that like a place like the hubs are not gonna and the tubes are not gonna they're not gonna play with their bottom line. They're not. They're not. And I think that they also operate recognizing that like a suit to take down a particular video in no way then impedes upon that video. Like, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, so I could be wrong, but that doesn't mean that another user can't upload it and it then seems to stand as a totally separate entity, and then the cycle starts over again.
Right.
We love this shit. We absolutely love this shit. We consume it voraciously.
Yeah, and it reminds me of two things. I think one, the fact that like, yeah, it's true, we can't really prevent people from just like re-uploading stuff. Ace, I think you're totally right. Nothing is ever deleted, right? There's always an archived version of a page that is saved somewhere. Someone has access to something and will be able to put it back up. It's nigh impossible to just completely remove something from the internet, right? And it reminds me, I think, like really obscurely of just like hacker accounts in gaming. How like they just never go away. It's always the same person just like ripping through accounts because they can.
Right.
Because
Right.
someone's profiting, and so they're like, why would I stop this business when yes, it's an inconvenience for some people, but like I'm still cashing a check on this. So I'll let this person blow through their whole life savings if they want to, as long as I get to make something out of it, which I think is really insidious. And then the other thing about the obsession with user-generated content and revenge porn, and it's not to say user-generated content is a bad thing. I myself, I advocate for people to have as much agency in their sexual freedom as they want. But
and a lot of it's fun and good.
But the problem I think with it, and especially with things like revenge porn and all that stuff, is that people's desire to access it stems from what we're going to get into with our second topic in a little bit here, is this need to have an unfettered, unfiltered pipeline of content from people, right? Nobody wants anything that is oversaturated with production. They want as much realness as humanly possible. They want people to be accessible and to be themselves and to do things that they would also do, so they can feel like you are equal to them. And I think that also makes it more desirable and more enjoyable.
Yeah. And I think what they want is the illusion of authenticity, right? Like, if you're going to a website to watch people fuck, like that experience is already mediated, right? And even before that, if somebody sends you a video of them and a paramour fucking, like they've chosen the camera angles, right? And they've chosen the moments that they're gonna, right? And maybe there's a little post-production on iMovie or whatever, right? Like that's always a mediated experience. We want to feel like it's real and raw and unfettered. And I would add too, that, when we think about user-generated content, particularly like pornography, and to Ace's point, like nothing's ever deleted. I think that like there's the inverse of that coin, and I don't know that there's a phrase quite that clear, but it's also like nothing's ever protected, right? So I think about the sex workers and content creators on sites like OnlyFans, like that shit gets leaked on the reg, right? There's one dickhead who pays whatever it is and then sauces it to the world. Like Belle Delphine is the person that immediately comes to mind, right? And I think, and there's like also a revenge element there too, right? It's like, she doesn't give me what I want and this price is exorbitant. So I'm going to go to Reddit. I'm going to find that guy who was the sucker, the simp who paid the money, right? And then I'm going to get that fat ass, however many gig file. And I'm going to, I'm going to get my free Belle Delphine content because fuck that bitch for charging me without showing me her pussy, right? That's like the sentiment. And so this is fucked. I laugh not because it's comedic, but it's just like there's no winning here, except for people who like to crank their meat to fucking revenge porn and steal food off of people's money by not paying for the stuff that they legitimately produce.
Right, and then what gets even worse, right, on the flip side of that, which is like a weird even thing to have to deal with, is then on the flip, right, when I posed that original question of like what happens when you upload it yourself on purpose for profit, what happens when you do what Bella Thorne did, right? And this is a topic that I know I wanted to cover, but it's long past due now. But for those of you who don't know, like Bella Thorne basically fucked over everybody that's ever used OnlyFans as a platform by inadvertently changing the pricing structure to a point where it was unsustainable for people who had normal functional pricing that had been benefiting them for such a long time to still profit off of that price point. They now had to match her absurd prices for content that was far less engaging than theirs, right? They had to, she was charging upwards of like 200
use of engaging.
Yeah, whatever.
I love that.
She was charging upwards of like $200, for content that flies in the face of things you can get for $5, right? Like the fact that Bella Thorne was charging $200 for non-nude content, and Riley Reid herself was like, I should have been a Disney star before I started doing porn because I only charge $5. Right? She recognizes the fact that her celebrity would have carried her farther if she had like gone somewhere else and then went to porn, and then she could do the same thing, because there's a weird sort of relationship that we have to status, and how we equate that status with desire, right? I think that ends up also coming back to this issue. The fact that a former Disney star turned actress model, right, who isn't doing nude content is charging infinitely more than a well-known adult actress, right, for content that is completely the opposite, is crazy. And it affects these people's livelihoods, right? It affects these women's livelihoods. It affects everybody's livelihood who uses the platform, actually, really.
Yeah. And it begs the question of, like, what are the erotics of it? Because it's clearly not economic, right? Like the rational choice theory would say, like, this person's going to go get the most bang for their buck, and they're going to go subscribe to multiple content creators for maybe that $200, and then get access to, like, a whole pantheon of goodies.
Like exactly the things that they want.
Right, as opposed to saying, well, I'm going to subscribe to this one person, and right, and the OnlyFans model is like you pay for a monthly subscription, and then there's the a la carte content that you then pay for, right? Like so this clearly isn't about like rational choice. There's like an erotics to watching a Disney star become an OnlyFans sensation, right? In the same way that I think, and it's not like one for one the same, but there's like an insidious erotics to watching a video of a rapacious gangbang, or to uploading a picture like nude sent to you by an ex-girlfriend who's now broken up with you, and uploading that onto the hub. And I think that that's a piece that goes like under theorized. Like there is something erogenous there, that I think we don't talk about. Like what is so enticing about non-nude content for Bella Thorne outside of like the fact that she's a Disney star?
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's like a lot of digging that still needs to happen.
You're speaking my language. You're speaking to conversations that I've had with other academics in the field about what my dissertation might be, which I'm not going to tell any of y'all about because you can't steal my fucking shit.